9550. Again, 911 calls that are being sent by the people calling 911 and saying I need a police officer. Not self-initiated calls. So, if we have this many calls that are citizen-initiated, detective and self-initiated traffic stops have been eliminated from the calculations. If they're not, you don't use the factor of 3, you use the factor of 2. So any way you want to do the calculations, you could use 3 or you could use 2. The actual average call for service was calculated to be 30 minutes. I wasn't able to get that from the CAD. They never told me how long the calls were. So I don't know how long it takes a police officer to come to your house and take a bicycle theft report. Could it be 30 minutes? I don't know. How long does it take for a barking dog? How long does it take for an EMS call? That was not in the CAD system. We don't have that information. So I used 30 minutes based on the fact that the square mileage in this town is 0.20. The actual statewide average time for police officers coming to work is between 1,700 and 1,800 hours. So when you fill in all the information, this is what you come up with. Calls for service, 1562. 30 minutes on a call. That's how you break the number down when you're putting it into the calculations. I used 1750. I didn't want to use 18, I didn't want to use 17, so I figured I'd cut it right in the middle. And then I also noted that we didn't know, unable to give you the calls for service response time or time spent on a call. I don't know if the officers in this room know what the response time is. I know there was a concern about it on February 2nd during the meeting. So when you look at the formula, and I'm going to show it to you 3 different ways so you can see it. You're going to multiply the calls for service by 30 minutes, which results in 781 hours of obligated time, which is directly spent on servicing calls. After you do that, you take the 781, you multiply it by the 3. Unobligated time, obligated time, and writing a report. And you divide it by the 1750, and the result is, based on the calls for service, Lake Como needs 1.3 police officers. 1.3. This is Lake Como's data, I didn't make this up. Let's look at it again. That's what it looks like. 1562, 30 minutes, times 3, divided by 1750, equals 1.33 police officers. Again, one more time we're going to look at it. Calls for service, multiply it by 0.50, 781. Bring it up here, multiply it times 3, 2343. Divided by 1750, comes up to 1.3 police officers. That's the calls for service that we're getting off the CAD system. So, let's look at how much it's costing to go for a call, based on the $1.9 million. In Lake Como, you had 1,562 calls for service. So when a resident calls and says there's a noise complaint or somebody's urinating on my front lawn, it's costing $1,216 to send that police officer to your house. In Belmar, it costs $457 to send a police officer to the house. But you know, that's just for the patrol. We have to count detectives. Detectives are important. Which, by the way, Lake Como doesn't have any detectives. But they're important in the department. And there's a formula for that also. What we have is, Lake Como had 41 Part 1 index crimes. For the layman in this room, Part 1 crimes are murder, assault, rape, larceny, burglary, things of that sort. The 7 most serious crimes. Disorderly persons are not included in that. So Lake Como has 41 of those. Belmar has 299, which, by the way, this comes right out of the New Jersey State Police information on the Uniform Crime Report. So we have 340 crimes between the 2 municipalities, and thank God, 95% of them are what they call nonviolent crimes, larceny, burglary. I think there was an reported rape. No murders. So, when you're trying to figure out how to come up with how many detectives I need, the formula seems to be 80 to 120 cases a police officer can handle. 80 being Newark, Patterson, Trenton, because they're handling some tough crimes. 120 is a suburban community. So you divide the 80 and the 120 into all the Part 1 crimes. Looks like this. So we need between 4.2 and 2.83 investigators between the two towns. Between the two towns and all the crimes that we have. Did I mention that Lake Como doesn't have a detective? So, let's look at how much it's costing us for a crime. We talked about the bike theft before. So when a citizen calls up and says, hey, they stole my bike, it's a Part 1 crime. We have 41 of those. It's costed $46,341 to send that police officer to your house, take your bike theft. It's a lot of money. It's costed $12,233 in Belmar. Lake Como residents, based on the 1.9, each resident's paying about $1,093 for the police department. 785 households, each household's paying about $24.20 for the police department. Another cost analysis. If we went with a contracted police service, we would lower the cost of per crime to $24,121. The calls for service would be reduced to $763. Again, that's what Belmar's paying. Some of the advantages on the contracted police services with Belmar, Lake Como doesn't have a detective. I think Belmar's got 4. So you'll have a detective bureau investigating and following up on your crimes. Community policing. As far as I know, Lake Como doesn't have community policing. I know there's community policing in the department. I listened to the tapes and heard all the wonderful things from all the citizens about how well the police department is. So in reality, that is good community policing. You guys are doing a good job. Part 1 crimes, we already went over. Calls for service, we went over. Is the Lake Como Police Department understaffed? The answer is yes. Spending a lot of money on overtime, spending a lot of money in the police department, but the police department is not ideally set up. We need to set it up properly. The actual cost savings to the borough is about 47.9% of the police budget, or $911,000. Now everybody's going to ask me, what does that equate to on our tax dollars? We have it in here. So, if we created a model staffing police department, I'd say you need 24 officers here between the 2 municipalities. You have 10 in Lake Como, you have 20 in Belmar, it's a total of 30. And based on the information that I gave you on the calls for service, you should have one officer working on every tour, A, B, C, and D, and have Belmar backing you up. So what would it actually cost us if we actually professionally, properly staffed the police department in Lake Como? Well, we would need a chief or a public safety director, whatever the governing body decided to choose. We have a lieutenant, so we would keep a lieutenant. I think we have 2 sergeants, 8 officers per squad, 2 officers on each squad, A, B, C, and D. Then you need a relief factor, and that's where the sergeants can help you out with the relief factor. We want to have at least 1 detective, because Lake Como doesn't have a detective. So it comes up to about 13 sworn officers. And then we have the Class 2s who come and work in the summertime. Adds up to about $75,000, usually, every year. And then we need an administrative assistant to help us out with some records, maybe handling evidence, assisting the chief or the public safety director. So the cost for about 13 officers would be about $2.4 million. Not 1.9, but 2.4 if we want to properly staff the Lake Como Police Department. So here's my model of what the department would look like if we properly staffed it for $2.4 million. We'd have a chief of police or public safety director, administrative assistant, lieutenant in patrol. We would have all the squads, A, B, C, and D. We would have our detective that we don't have. And then we have our Class 2s, special law enforcement officers. Interesting concept. The New Jersey State Police say Monmouth County has an average of 2.3 police officers per 1,000 people. We have 1,738 people. So when you add up 2.3 times 738, you get 3.9 officers. So now you ask me, how'd you come up with the 4 officers, Rick? It's right there. 3.9 officers. This comes right from the New Jersey State Police information. The referendum, tax issue versus the new properly staffed police department. If the borough were to accept the suggested police contracted services, they would reduce the budget by 47.9%, or reduce it by $911,000, or reduce the taxes by 24 cents. That's 24 cents. Example, on a home assessed in Lake Como at $400,000, if you went the other way, it would increase by 24 cents. Big numbers. There's no magic wand. We certainly have to have communications, but it's important that we have cooperation when we're trying to put this together. The dissolution of the police department needs continuous evaluation. Set realistic goals, problem solving, the courage to face fallout on people's political careers. Not going to vote for them, they voted us out. One thing I want to emphasize, this is not a police shared service. The practice is regarded as a dissolution of the police services, contracted police services, and it's not a police shared service. What's next? We need to form a working group. The working group should consist of the mayor and 2 council members, the Belmar chief of police, Lake Como's CFO and business administrator, and then we also need DCA or DLGS to give you some guidance so we can facilitate this a little quicker. I think we should meet twice a month for the first 6 months to discuss the outstanding issues and concerns. Because there will be some. People are going to complain the cop didn't get there fast enough. Or, you know, I called and nobody responded. I heard that last week that they got a call to Belmar. Took 25 minutes for some kids that were walking around the neighborhood. I listened to the tape. Then we're going to create a smaller working group that will meet once a month as a general practice to go over anything that's going on in the municipalities. This is for our CFO.
The translation to us to make a little bit understand the numbers. I would appreciate that.
Okay, Mayor, thank you. Thanks, Ren. All right, again, I apologize for my back as well. We ran a quick chart to try to take some of these numbers and get it thrown at everybody to try to make it as least complicated as possible. We pretty much took their 2015 budget that was adopted and we used last year, we operated under. We projected the numbers that DCA calculated for us to have the police department at the level that it should be in order to maintain our own police department. So that's a 2016 number, which would require a referendum. Then we projected our numbers out to 2018 if we contracted with Belmar. So let's just start with the 15 budget. Our tax rate was 0.714. The amount of money that all of our residents paid for local taxes, it's only local, not county or school, was $2,651,193.04. So on a $400,000 home, you paid $2,857.79 to Lake Como. The next level is if we have a referendum, it's going to increase our rate to 1.001. We're going to have to collect $3,750,553.38, and what you would pay on your $400,000 home this year would be $4,003.35, an increase of $1,145.56 just for the local tax. Now projecting out to 2018, we're calculating that the tax rate will be 0.539. So just getting rid of that middle column, basically, I don't like some of the other numbers. If you take the 0.714 minus the 0.539, that would be the difference between last year, full year, and what we're projecting in 2018. You have to remember in 16's budget, whatever way you go, referendum or contract with Belmar, you're going to be over your cap. However, we have a lot of legacy costs that would have to be included. We'd have to pay people that are sick, vacation, unemployment. We continue paying pensions through 17. So a lot of these numbers you're not going to see drop until 2018. That's the reason I jumped a couple of years. Taxes in 2018 for your household would be $2,157.37, a difference of $700.42. Really, that covers that, Mayor?
Yeah, if you could just explain the budget number, the reference, how you arrived at that.
Yes, we took the 15-year budget. We included all our regular expenses that are part of the budget. We added the numbers that were calculated that we would need for our police department, added those numbers in. We have an increase in pensions, health insurance, we'd be hiring new guys, and that's where that number came from. We also included other items we would need to run the town as well. You know, the existing costs, it's not just police costs in that number.
That would equate to an $1,145 increase on a home valued at $400,000
Yes, that's correct.
from 15 to 16.
Yes.
And plus you would have the water assessment
This does not include any of the water budget. This is only our current tax, which the police department's in. We don't have beach utility, so we can't charge any police to the water budget. We simply have police in our current budget.
I mean, in addition to that potential increase, there would be the increase for water for 300.
Oh, absolutely, right. Right.
And the county and...
County and school are not included in this number. And you also have to remember, part of this number that's driving 16 is we had, I know it was brought up in our last meeting, somebody had questioned me on it. We had costs that were one-time fixes. The auditor had explained that. We took money over from the surplus, we took money from FEMA, we took money from insurance. Basically took every one-time fix we could take, and that's no longer here.
Could you just explain why you're projecting out to 2018 with the Belmar contract as opposed to 17?
Because 17 would still have close to $300,000 in police and fire retirement benefits payment. We pay annually, once a year in April, we pay a bill that's sent to us by the state. We'll be required to pay that for through 17. So you won't see that off of our budget until the 3 years has passed.
The referendum number with that, though, be a continuing number, I guess indefinitely.
Oh, well, yeah, that's gonna just be our new base. So if that went to vote, and tonight the mayor and council does have it on the agenda. The state, do you mind if I get into why some of these things are on the agenda tonight?
No.
We do have, the state does have a requirement that if we believe in planning our budget, which obviously you all know we've been planning this for months, if we believe we are gonna have a cap problem, we have to send a letter to the state this week intending to file for transitional aid. If we're intending to have a referendum, we have to do a notice in the newspaper to let people know they're going to be mail-in ballots. So both of those items are on tonight's agenda. The council, whether they decide to go that way or not, they're required to notify the state this week. So there's no obligation if they decided to not have a referendum. They would simply notify the public that they weren't going to do that. Likewise with the letter of intent for the transitionary aid, if for some reason somebody believed we didn't need it, then we would just send a letter to the state as well, saying we were withdrawing that intent.
Thank you. Rick, did you just want to wrap it up?
Thanks. Okay, now we're going to open it up for some questions. I'm sure everybody's got some questions. Councilor?
Rick, if you could, I just want to invite the council if they have any questions first. Brian, Louise, yourself, then we'll open it up to the public.
We got one question. You said there's approximately going to be an increase on $400,000 next year to $1,145. Is it safe to assume that that's going to go upwards from that in 2017? We don't know the exact number,
It
but
would be safe to say it's probably about 2% every year.
Anyone else?
You mentioned that the working group, there would consist of mayor and two council, for example. Would that be Belmar and Lake Como, or just Belmar, or what does that look like?
I think you can just set it up amongst yourselves.
Okay.
But you need to set up some type of working group to be able to work through any of the issues. Of course, you need the chief from Belmar to come over and address the issues.
Okay.
And I don't know what the mayor has in mind on who the council people would be.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't have to be two, it could be three, it could be, 4.
Okay. I just wonder if there was something that was
No.
standard in working
No.
with. Okay. And you mentioned also that you or your group stay involved during the transition.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit? What does that look like?
We come to the meetings and we look at, contracts. We're looking at manpower, whether or not there is enough manpower, what the calls for service are, what the response time should be, how often do the officers get to the job, how much time they're spending. I mean, those are all the things that, you know, we should be looking at when we're here. Plus, there may be some state agency things that we can facilitate to help the situation along. Like maybe with civil service, maybe with, there might be a DEP issue or something. You know, anything that comes up, we'll try to facilitate it for you.